Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ian Mann, and I'm joined on the panel today with Ms. Linda Schultz and Mr. Richard Whitbread. The Assessment Department personnel today is Mr. Jeremy Pohl, and the administrative personnel is Ms. Sally Caulfield. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all of the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing item 1 on our docket today. Ms. Caulfield, would you please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony?
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Jeremy Ryan Pohl.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, please state your full name.
Ayrton Neufeld.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to the matter at number 1 on the docket, but as a preliminary matter, the discussion took place just before we opened the hearing, and there are 3 items of appeal listed with respect to this matter. The street address of 317 Donald, that's liability to taxation, classification of property, and amount of assessed value. I believe Mr. Neufeld indicated that it was only the amount of assessed value that would be the subject or at issue during this hearing. And Ms. Caulfield had indicated that she was to send the withdrawal for the liability to taxation and the classification of property to Mr. Neufeld, who then undertook to send them back. Is that fair?
Yes, that is correct. Thanks.
Thank you. Then that preliminary matter having been dealt with, Mr. Pohl, if you could please turn your attention to 317 Donald Street, and if we could have your evidence, please.
Sure. File number is 25307. Roll number is 13096060200. The 2026 assessment is $13,840,000. It's a Class B building built in 2005. It's a leasable area of approximately 81,000 square feet, and there is about 60 underground parking on a single level underground parking beneath the building. If we turn to my page, I'll just go through the pictures of the property first, just so we get a good feel of it. On page 6, it's located on just off Donald and Portage, just on the edge of the Shed District. So if you look on the opposite side, it doesn't quite show it there, but you would have the MTS building, and 311 Portage is right across from it. So, and it's right behind Mount Co-op. So on page 7 shows the location of the property, how you gain access to it. There's obviously a park gate around the corner, and beneath, I should say, that top platform there, it is accessible, it is usable, we'll get to that in a moment. If we turn to page. Starting on page. okay, Page 33 is the photos of the property. I've been in this property, not for this inspection, some 10 years ago, it must be. So I have had the inspection of the property, but again, a number of years ago, I don't think much have changed in the building since, so. Again, the entrance of the building, page 33. And if we just go through it, page 34, there's shows that there is some on-site parking as well as gaining access to the building through the parkade. Page 35 is the lobby area. And just so we go through 36 and 37 as well. It is owner occupied. I'll get to that in a moment, but the main floor is owner occupied, and it's a bit atypical for a Class B building. It was built to suit, so to speak. And that's why you see the first floor the way that it is. It's a print shop, copying area, storage, starting on page 38. And as we move through it, you do see that it is a bit atypical for the marketplace. If it's a normal OP building, it's usually retail space, maybe bank space or office space. But it usually wouldn't have a print shop building area. As you go through it, you see the photos as such. So those photos, and at approximately page 54, I do have some photos of the fourth floor as well, which is more typical of the building as you go through the remainder of the building. As you can see, it is a newer build. It is in good quality, good condition. More what you would normally expect from a 2005 build. And as you go through the remainder of the photos, you'll see that. So pretty much standard stuff for the remainder of the building. So those pictures you can go through. And they end at page 78. And the last few pages are of the parkade itself, starting on page 77. And again, it just shows that there's approximately 60 parking stalls. Slab on grade construction underneath. One level, there's not multiple levels, so 60 parking stalls is adequate for the building. On the next page, on page 79, we do have an advertising for the property. Turn to page 80, shows the floors that are being available. The asking rent is $14.95 a square foot. So at that point, I'll get back to our comparables. I think it's a good input to that. If we go to our study, marketplace study from 2015 to 2022, so it's an 8-year look. This is a common document. I would think by now most panel members have seen it. I'm not going to go through it in full detail. If you'd like to read it, it's a short read, but I'll leave that at your convenience. I'll touch on the highlighted points. Page 3, we see that my analysis for the OP marketplace for lesser performing Bs, we have $13 to $14 to $14.50 square foot range. For average Bs, we have $14.50 to $16.50, and then better performing Bs, B prime and beyond, would be between $16.50 and $18. The outside sources indicate an average asking rent for 2022 is $16 and stabilized at $16 for the 3 years that we're looking at for stabilization, at least for or from 2020 to 2022. So at Cushman & Wakefield, they're getting around $16. If you look at the Johnson report, what they're asking for, when you filter out, obviously on our occupied property, they're asking about $15.50. And the weighted average is again, sorry, 1563 and 1550, depending on the 2020 or the stabilized asking rent. So it is well within that for model wise. If we go on the next page, over just shows a synopsis of the parameters that we're putting in place. We see that the weighted average, I'm more fond of using the weighted average because it gives better analysis of property of the property class at $14.96 a square foot for the stabilized look. and for the 2022 year, 1546. So what we see reflected in the marketplace as far as what's asking for, what's being achieved, we see around a 1450 to 1550 rate, with an average being around $15. So I think the property is at least average to a bit better than average. I wouldn't call it a B prime, but it's in that range where it's a bit better than average. So touch on vacancy. We do see a vacancy upward tick. We have for 2020 vacancy of 14%, 2021 17.5%, and 2022 we see it at 24%. It stabilizes to 18.8%. Overall, we have a 12% vacancy on the property. I do think that's reasonable time frame. We don't go with any actual vacancy. There's going to be some discussion on the vacancy. Got to look at it on economic horizon. Just because one particular year is looking bad or it's pushing that doesn't mean that we're going to put it to a maximum vacancy as far as look into the future kind of thing. And then aside from that, we see that the shortfall that we apply or that the market is around $14.84, a little over $14 for weighted to average to median. I'd like to remind the panel that shortfall usually doesn't come up much as far as an argument, but when we put our model parameters on, it's not what it's not whether it's advertised to market or whether the owners are advertised a certain rate for when they come under lease. It's to accommodate a space that's not being heated or ventilated at a comfortable use the way you normally would. You would turn the lights down, you turn the heat down, you turn it to minimum setup. So those model rates that we put on for it should be a bit below what we actually find in the marketplace. Because you're not going to be heating vacant space, lighting vacant space, and doing things to a comfortable use. You're going to reduce your costs a little bit. So minor points on a shortfall. And then the non-recoverables. We had a big for St. Mary's, we had a big hearing a number of years back. I do the study exactly the same way as what the panel indicated, that below line items and things of such nature aren't included in non-recoverables. So that's what we continued with as well. Here we're reflecting on that as well. So we see an average 2.3%, 2.2%, and median of 0.5% for the stabilized. If you look at the 2022 year, again 2.2%, 2.2%, and 0.5% for average, weighted average and median. So those are the parameters that we can look at. But you will notice though, you won't find this property in the study. I've looked at a number of properties that leased out when I went through this property, and part of this was discovered with the agent here today. I thought this property was completely owner occupied with the exception of the city lease that's in place. So when we're reviewing this, and I'm creating this study, what would I include other than one city lease into several hundred other leases? I didn't include this study or didn't include it for that purpose. Typically, if it's mainly owner occupied or it's owner occupied, it's not included in the study because it doesn't participate in the marketplace, which makes sense. From my understanding is that a few of these tenants, which I thought were owner occupied or inclusive of the owners being on arm's length, turns out that they may have been or they are. So if you're looking to find 317 Donald in the study, it's not there for that reason. So from that point, I'll get on to the actual workup. You can see that one other thing I should touch before the workup on page 2. There's a 2007 sale in February, 14,300,000. I put no weight to that. That's in 2007. It shouldn't be received anyway now. That's just a historical sale. So don't put any weight to that. On page 3 is the workup of the property. We see that after I went through the comparables, our average rent that we have on the property is $14.89. So we have it right at average. We see that the marketplace is commanding about $15.50. And we see that the study is indicating around $15 rent is appropriate. So at $14.89, I see no reason to adjust for that. We do have a 12% vacancy applied to the property. So when we run through the numerics of it, that rent gives us a PGI of $1,207,186, with a 12% vacancy gives us an effective gross income of $1,062,324. Our expenses, we do have at 3%. We've proven that out to be about 2.2% at 3%. And the shortfall is at $40. Again, there's a bit of variance there, as I highlighted for comfort use. Net operating income comes to $894,268, capped at 7%, which is the average of what we have for capital leasing rate as far as the studies that I'll get to in a moment. Or outside sources, I should say, I'll get to in a moment. And capped at gives us our $12,775,000. On the next page over, and that's just for the building. The next page over, obviously on page 4, we have the parking structure. We have 60 stalls at $103.50 a stall on a net basis. That gives us a net operating income of $74,520, capped at 7%, gives us $1,065,000. Highlighted for your convenience, I'll go through some of the information here. Page 4, we see that the parkade, if it is full, meaning there's no vacancy within the parkade itself, produces a gross parking revenue of approximately $148,079 and a gross monthly rent of about $205. So to me, that does work out quite accurately. So the next page over, we look at page 5. Synopsis of the two income streams. $13,840,000 is what it gets back to, which is what I'm recommending today to be confirmed. A little bit further into the look at the actual building itself, we see the NOI summary that I did for 2022, 2021, and that should be 2020. I apologize. It's approximately $760,000, $785,000, $883,000. We see a bit of an uptick in vacancy as we go along. And our NOI that we have on the property is approximately $968,788. So next few pages over, just to highlight on page 8, after looking at the property, you see the information that I took out of the income stream, highlighted in yellow for your convenience. Anything that isn't allowed for as far as a below line item, tenant improvements, leasing commissions, things of such nature, and they're adjusted out. And for your convenience, that's where the adjusted NOIs come from. So with that, I think that $13,840,000 is reasonable. It should be confirmed here today by the panel. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Neufeld, questions?
Yeah. You say tenant improvements, leasing commissions shouldn't be included. Who pays for those?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You tenant improvements, am I coming through clear? Or
Can you say it again?
Yeah. Tenant improvements, leasing commissions, you say aren't appropriate, so they don't go into any analysis whatsoever. Who pays for these?
I'll start at the as far as tenant, any below line items, tenant improvements, leasing commissions, things of such nature. That's not allowed by Manitoba case law. That was confirmed at the municipal board. Where there was a big test case a couple years back with another agency. We confirmed that. We had direction from that. So whether the property owner pays it or the tenants pay it in lieu of a lesser rent, which is sometimes lease mechanism that's in place, we don't include that for analysis. So any below line items would be removing.
But what if it was zero? Would the building be worth the same?
From a model perspective, we would look at market, we would look at what the leasehold is. We would reconcile between the two and come to a determination on market, and that's exactly what I did here today.
Well, no, I meant it's a simple comparing the two. If you have a building with 50,000 in tenant improvements and leasing commissions and a building with zero, and that's a trend through 10 years, say.
You wouldn't be including the leasing commissions.
Well, what would be a more desirable building to buy?
Both of the same operating practices, whether you have if you're doing if you're doing the brokerage, if you're doing the leasing, if you're doing everything yourself, you wouldn't be incurring those costs through a broker. You'd be doing that yourself.
But
Now,
what if you got a 20-year lease and they don't want TIs?
uh, you're getting into hypotheticals here, like there's different mechanisms in place. For
I would
leases.
say I don't think I'm getting into hypothetical. You're ignoring two line items in a statement. I think that's
No, case law disallows them, so I'm removing them. It's quite clear.
is that binding court case law or is that one municipal board decision? You know, we've got a lot we don't follow from the municipal board, right?
Well, Mr. Paul, Mr. Neufeld, rather than getting into jurisprudence and what is binding and what is not, perhaps in your evidence, Mr. Neufeld, you can provide either contrary law with respect to that would be either binding or persuasive on our considerations, or you could deal with it in a factual basis in yours rather than
Well,
continuing along this line.
yeah, no, fair enough. I had to try, but you're right. That's time to move on. Okay. Now so you said something about shortfall. I found interesting. You just you, when you're bringing in costs for a shortfall, it's for empty buildings. Is that what you said? Essentially.
Typically, what you see marketed to in Johnson report or what we reported back to the INEs, it's for comfortable use, for common hallways, whatever. But you're not going to be from model perspective. It should be a little bit below that because you're not going to have it at a comfortable use. If you have say you have an empty building, right? In theory, it's 100% vacant for a number of years. Are you going to heat that to comfortable use? Are you going to put the lights on? Are you going to put the ventilation through? No, you're going to put it at a minimum standard, right? And it's costing going to be upwards slightly from that.
Where is that data? Where is that in the form to put in the heat for for an unoccupied space versus an occupied space? Is there even a way for the city to have that reported to them?
Well, let me be clear. The model comes out with their parameters. I file independent analysis. I go from what's reported by the owners. As you can see through all the INEs that I've looked at, I do what would be that participates in the marketplace on a net basis or mainly net basis. And from that, I determine what the parameters are, and I do it per year. So everything's in line, rent's in line, short vacancies in line, shortfalls in line, non-recoverable expenses are in line. From that, I made my determination what we should present an appeal and how we should value it. As far as vacancy or as far as shortfall, sometimes it's a bit of a variance. But typically what you would see from our model is that it's a little bit $1 or $2 maybe underneath what market is.
Where's that data? Is that just that's
in
following
this case here, let me be clear, the data is on every single page that you want to look at shortfall for any building. Okay, as far as what's being reported from the ownership groups back to us via the IEs. If you look on the Johnson report, the Johnson report is the only one that actually reports us back per property. We see that the shortfall as well as should say the shortfall that we see is reported for each and every property for the most part. So that comes from what's being advertised. And then the model parameters, what you see on page 3, and that's at $14. Now, again, like I said, it might be a bit below. My study overall indicated from a stabilized look, and again, I actually do a stabilized look and year by year look. The reason why I do that is because if I'm at municipal board, I'm going to stabilize the last 3 years. I'll probably look at 5 years, stabilize the last 3, and I'll give the year out right up against the reference date. I'm basically showing more than what any municipal board has ever seen. And of course, we did it once already there, but I'm showing it at the board revision level as well to give a good full analysis of the marketplace. So when I'm looking at a $14 rent, or sorry, $14 shortfall, and I see $14.84 for a stabilized shortfall, I'm not going to ask for 80% implied 80% shortfall. I'm fine at $14. Hopefully that's clear enough.
I mean, that didn't really answer the question, but that's okay. Thank you. Vacancy. You mentioned that you use model of B, but you in your report, you're showing that there's more than 12% that's on the market. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as the market, if you look at the market.
No, I'm just sorry, talking site specific here.
Oh, site specific. Site specific is on page. I tested my app this morning.
I know, I just saw it.
On page 14.
14.
Occupied area. 73,662, 91%, vacant, 7,129. So
Okay, sorry, that's not what I was referring to. You had our listing agreement in there from Colliers, and it was showing, I just want to find it.
that could be space coming, like, to be clear, that could be space coming to market, owner not wanting to be there anymore. I'm showing what the actual needs are.
Okay, but if
So-
the building, okay, sorry, on your page 80, you've got the full 400 on the market, 201, 5,600, unit 179, and unit 120, 6,400. So that's a total of about two floors are on the market. If you're buying this building April 1st, 2023, and that's out there for lease, are you buying it based on it being vacant or based on it being full?
If I'd be buying it, I'd be basing it on the marketplace. Whether it's owner occupied at that point in time, that owner's looking to leave. I'd be looking at what I could actually achieve in that rent. I'd be doing
You don't think
analysis.
you don't think the empty floors and the space are relevant to when you're buying a building? It's more about looking at what the market would do.
If you're going to be buying a building and a portion of it or a significant portion of it is owner occupied, you're obviously gonna have to either be an owner occupied yourself for the remainder of that space. Or you're gonna have to lease that out and have an absorption or maybe have a tenancy.
Yep.
Whatever, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Part, right? But
Yeah, no,
you'd
fair
be
enough.
looking to lease it, you'd be looking to sell it based on what the actual market is. The owner would know what it is and the purchaser, potential purchaser would know what it is. They would come to acting on their own best interest at sale price. That would be beneficial both, as far as a space that could be coming to market. That's just an advertising. We see what the owner is asking for.
Good. Okay, would you consider this a good location?
I would think it's a desirable location, yes. It's just a bit off of Portage, but obviously you have a significant development on the other side of Portage with obviously now it would be Canada Life Center, but with the remainder of the buildings developed behind Canada Life, it's a strong location. I don't have any issues with it.
Would you consider this to be a high crime area at all?
Downtown experiences. I'm not, I
Very,
don't
sure.
statistic that there's crime everywhere downtown, I'll be quite blunt.
But you wouldn't think this is any worse than Portage and Maine or.
I think it's homogeneous throughout the downtown. I honestly can't tell you the stats from one corner to the next. An officer reviewing that or a study reviewing that. I don't know how you would be able to determine that for this purpose in this hearing. But generally speaking, I think downtown there is an element of crime.
Sorry.
But I don't think it would impact market in one spot or the other, any more or less.
Okay, that's where is the closest skywalk entrance?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, sorry. Let me know. I thought
I'm missing the first couple words.
Okay, so it's kind of cut out. Yeah. This is supposed to be my better speaker, and I don't know. No one says anything at the municipal board. Where's the closest skywalk entrance to the subject?
Closest skywalk entrance, well, you'd be able to go through when it's open, obviously, Canada Life. You'd be able to go through Newport, still old school Newport building, 330 Portage.
Across the street, right? Across Portage. Yeah. And then you mentioned how this wasn't in the study, that other document that you attached.
Yeah.
Is that study, I mean, is that how you come up with rents here?
No, be clear, the modelers come up with the parameters. I, as an assessor, have taken the lead on actually doing a study for the A's and B's, Class A and B assets. I do it independent. I do it for significant time period. And I include every building that participates in the marketplace on a net or primarily net basis, meaning if you got a couple gross leases in a building, but it's mainly net, okay, it'll come in. If you're half all gross, then it's not coming in. If it's owner occupied, it's not. So
Okay.
if you have a building that has one lease in it, or maybe two, but it's primarily owner occupied, it doesn't participate in the marketplace. So
Fair enough. No, I think, and I'm just going to redirect this a little bit. I understand why this wouldn't be in your study, and that's fair. I'm more or less concerned about how the model rents are perceived. For instance, I'm in 330 St. Mary here today on the Skywalk. Is that going, are you comparing that 1-to-1 to 317 Donald? Or is there adjustments made? How exactly, like what are there, is there one category for what you call B?
If you look at page 4 of my study, and it's kind of the covering of page 4 gives the numerics for the totality of the study. All buildings are there. You can review them. Below
Okay,
that, below that, you see a bell curve. There's statistical analysis there. You see in green, the one standard deviation or 68% of the marketplace. So within that, the next two, what the second standard deviation, the remainder of it falls between that minus 5% on the extreme ends. So we're at a 95% confidence interval when you're at that. I'm very good with the data. It meets statistical analysis. If you look beyond that, any individual property that you want to look at on starting on page 5, including the Johnson report on top of that, the Johnson report shows what's actually asking in a global sense as well, similar to the study. So you see what the actual market is on a global sense. From that point, you can look at any individual property that's in the study on an 8-year line.
Okay.
So you can review, and I constructed this study for panel, for agent, for appeal purposes specifically. If you just read through the first 2 pages, it gives a very well detailed analysis of what you'll see on the remainder.
Okay,
If you wanted
maybe
to
I'll be
look at
clear.
330 St. Mary's, you could. If you wanted to look at any other building, the panel can look at anything they want at their fingertips.
Let me be more clear about my question. Sorry, that's my fault. On your page 3 of the brief, your rents range from 1429 to 1762.
Yeah.
Are those rents calculated based on all the buildings here in this other study? Or would you, and do you agree or not that most of these would be better than the subject?
Let me be clear. The parameters that are put in place is for modeling. I review it.
But are they in there? Are these buildings that I'm looking at here in the model? I'm not like I appreciate what you have here, but I need.
Where do you think we pull the rent from? Where do you think we pull the costs from?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I'm having trouble because the two are talking over each other.
yes,
So we can be more respectful of finishing a sentence.
I think that's a very good point. I was going to raise that myself. When one of you is speaking, please allow the other to finish so that if there's any problems with the audio, we can clearly hear both the point and the question and the answer rather than speaking at the same time.
Certainly. Do you need us to repeat anything, or?
I think I've got the gist of it. Mr. Whitbread and Ms. Schultz, have you got a need to hear any of the questions or answers repeated?
No, I'm good, thank you.
That last interchange was a little bit, and I don't know if the parties remember what they were saying. It was getting a little bit heated, I thought. I didn't quite get what was being said.
The last with, if you could continue your answer, please, Mr. Pohl, with respect to the modeling and how that related vis-a-vis the report that you filed as well. I think that was the essence of Mr. Neufeld's question, including whether the building had been, and if I get this wrong, please correct me, Mr. Neufeld, whether the building at the subject property at 317 Donald had been included in that study and where the rents arose from the, I believe you said the modeled.
Yeah.
Correct, but sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Go ahead. If I've got that correct, Mr. Neufeld. If I don't,
if I could just quickly
correct
clarify where the 317 isn't in the study.
Right.
It was believed to be owner occupied. And that my question is whether or not the study is going directly towards the valuation of 317. But so mostly on.
Okay, Mr. Pohl, was that the question as you understood it?
Yeah, there's a multiple point there, and I apologize. It's easier when we're all in the same room. We can
Right.
talk all around, but we're all working on a bit of a lag. I apologize. It sounded heated. It's not heated from my perspective.
It's
Okay,
not needed.
I'll try to answer it point per point. Generally speaking, the modeling section of our ATD comes up with all parameters, including rent, from the income and expense questionnaires that were provided. I'm independent of that. My study is independent from that. I do it all on my own. I review all the marketplace. I put from the same INEs, from the outside source documents that I have coded, I craft a study. From that point, when we get to appeal, I'm looking at both. What did the modeler say? What is the actual INE say for the subject property? And what is the marketplace study say? Now, correct, I'll touch the 317. My understanding was it was the only city lease, was the only arm's length independent lease that was in this property from the inception of the study and carrying forward. After discussion with Ayrton, prior to appeal, it turns out that that's not correct. I had this under appeal a number of years ago. I went through inspection of the property 10 plus years. I can't remember now, it's been so long. I thought it was just the city lease, and at that point, it mainly only occupied. What does one city lease taken into account an entire marketplace? What would I glean from that? If it's owner occupied primarily, it's not included in the study because it doesn't participate in the study.
And I think we've got that point. I think. Sorry.
Okay, good. So when I'm looking at it, the $14.89 is purely from model. They're sourcing it from the INEs. My work is also sourced from the INEs and outside sources that I pulled from. So hopefully that answers everything. If not, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld, did that answer the question or clarify it?
Yeah, I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm not a whole lot of questions left. There's a couple though. Mr. Pohl, you mentioned the main floor. I think you seem to be in agreement with me that it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's lower quality than the rest. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't say lower quality. I would say a different use. And fit up on that floor is for the particular use.
Well, I think, sorry, sir.
Like it's a 2005 build. I wouldn't say it's lower quality. It's for specific use.
But you called it a print shop. Like, would you see a print shop paying $15 on the top floor of the building, or would they, yeah, like finishing?
If a property owner is going to lease to market and they're leasing the first, second, fourth floor, whatever, and it's inclusive of 30,000 square feet, I'm just spitballing numbers, whatever. And their operation needs that, yeah, they'd be paying roughly what that market is. As far as the desirability, and I want to be clear on this, you have to have a particular tenant that would want that. And I think, and this is what I want to be clear on, overall, I think there'd be less of a demand for the first floor the way that it is, because you have to have a particular tenant that would need that utility on the first floor. In this case, I see a lesser than market demand for that. So.
Okay, so I think that's fair. The $9 rent on the third floor. Now, was that my understanding that you believe that was owner occupied? Is that fair to say?
I thought the entire building was owner occupied or not use of the space, just because it's owner in there, perhaps it was the space that I'm not using, but I thought everything in there was owner occupied with the exception of the city lease.
The city, okay. Does it change anything knowing that the $9 rent is a open market fair paid rent?
I didn't review that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I think I can address the rest in mine. I'm just thinking this through. Sorry. Yeah, no, I think I'm good on questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, questions?
Just one clarification on your vacancy rate, you have 12%. That's based on the model, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
but on page 14, you've got owner occupied and 8.8 is the vacancy at that time, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so and we're basing everything on the model then, right?
Yes, I don't see, when I'm looking at this building, I don't see a higher degree of vacancy that's necessary from market, from way up our model. I don't see any functional obsolescence. I don't see any barriers that are coming, that would require that. I don't see performance that is, and that's the essence, this cycle coming up, you'll see a 10-year study, 10-year look in studies. So if you individually look at any building, you can literally track to see what buildings have chronic vacancy or high degree of vacancy. We'll be able to show that. That's the whole emphasis of the way I've crafted the study. In this case here, I don't see that in this building. So I would not be putting anything other than model.
Okay, thank you. Other questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread.
Yeah, just a couple of areas. Looking at vacancy and free rent on your page 8.
Page 8.
Pardon me, yes, about the middle of the page.
Yep.
You're there?
Yep, page 8, yes.
Yeah, I don't recall ever seeing vacancy presented in this fashion. And what I mean by that is vacancy operating cost and vacancy property tax. I get vacancy based rent. Can you explain?
Where are you seeing that? Page 8?
Yeah, page 8, under less vacancy and free rent.
Sorry, I'm not having that on my page 8. Where are you? Maybe you're on different pages.
Well,
It's part of the subject property 2022 income and expense information in your primary brief.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on page 8, we see,
It's the income statement.
yeah, on page 8, highlighted in yellow, I only have parking rent.
Yeah. if
Down
you
in the middle, the negative, the
Oh,
minus.
sorry, okay, sorry, I thought you meant what I highlighted, okay,
No.
on vacancy and free rent, yes, okay, yes.
Okay, vacancy operating cost and vacancy property tax. I'm sorry, I don't recall seeing it presented in this fashion. Can you just help me understand that?
Sure. I go through every item. There's a cross section of property owners. Some property owners report certain ways, some property owners report different ways. I actually like the way Collier's reports. They come up with a PGI. You see what the potential rent is, potential gross rent. And then they'll actually take off vacancy for base costs. They'll actually take off operating costs and property taxes associated with that vacancy. Other property owners, they'll just report a collected rent. They don't give you a PGI. They don't give you vacancy. They don't give you a breakout of what the actual cost would be for your base rent or your operating costs or your taxes. Sometimes they will just put a line item in which will cover all those. Sometimes they don't. In this case here, this is just one of the ways that the market reports to us. It is quite clear. I'm not
Okay.
preferred, but
Because I agree. I think I've only seen the other presentation.
yeah, it's not often. It's not often.
So now you've testified that the number you've used at 12% is model driven. And I understand you have some latitude when you see the model numbers. And then you look at this, which comes out to close to 20% vacancy against the 1.105 stated income. Does that cause you to sort of step back and think, well, gee, maybe it is more than 12% and I need to adjust that?
Sorry, can you review that again? What are you getting 20% vacancy from the
Well,
actual costs?
if you take the 199,881 that you've got for the 3 vacancy levels there against the 1,105,000 base rent gross potential, it's close to 20%.
Yeah, I understand what you're doing, but then you'd be adding in a different analysis. Like if you're looking at it, we take it from our rent. Then we apply a vacancy, then you apply your expenses at 3% non-recoverable and your shortfall. That's inclusive of it. You're adding in a couple line items that I wouldn't be included in that
So you wouldn't say it's close to 20% based
No,
on just a raw
no.
calculation.
no, you should be looking at it from the PGI, the loss of rent. And then, of course, with the shortfall and
Okay, okay, take the other two items out
yeah.
and come up with that. And so that wouldn't cause you to pause and say, oh, this is a little bit higher than 12%.
No, what would cause me to pause when I'm looking at it is, again, why I crafted the study the way I did, is market's in whatever it is, and you can see fluctuations in the market. Okay, that's the market. When you see a property that is out of line with the market. Okay, the whatever 10% vacancy over 8 years for OFP. If you see a building that hovering around 18, 22, and it just can't in over a decade come back down to what market is. That's when I start looking to apply a higher vacancy. Now, within that time frame, if I see that same property at market for vacancy or a bit below, if say you have 2 anchor tenants and a couple other residual tenants in the building, and you're performing below market, when an anchor tenant leaves a big hole, you see a big jump. It may take a while to fill that hole, absorption to come back to that, whether you're looking at another anchor tenant to come in or you're looking at carving up that space to get back to market. If your operating strategy is to go that way, I would not be looking to give it an increase in vacancy for that either. That's just an operating strategy. I'm looking at it, how does the building on average perform in line with market? So if there is any barriers to bringing market in, or the study will reflect that in the performance of the building. So here, I don't see that at all.
Okay. With respect to the vacancy and turnover in the building, one of Mr. Neufeld's questions focused on the area that the building is in and the traffic around the building. In your opinion, well, first, has there been significant turnover in the building in the 15, 20 years that it's been in place? Do you know?
I don't believe so. I believe it was built to suit for the owner occupier primarily. I think the city lease went in. I believe there was a couple, like I said, I thought all of the other tenancies were related to the owner. But I think I think there was a couple spaces that weren't being used by the owner. I'm not too quite sure. Like I went through it a number of years ago, but I can't say it's been like almost a decade probably by the time I was inspecting the property way back then. But generally speaking, I don't see that. There's no barrier to market here, bringing market in. So I think the location is pretty good.
Okay, so that then pushes me to the focus on my next set of questions, which is around the photography that you provided. Is extensive photography. I noted that some photos were from 2010 and some were from 2019. Have you been in the building in the last 5 years?
Oh, no, I don't think I've been in the building maybe even 10 years. It's been a while. But I did go through for appeal purposes, and that's where the main floor obviously was the focal point. I needed to see that.
So in fairness, are you able to comment on whether there's been any deterioration since 2019 in the building itself?
I assume that the property owner is taking care of the property. I don't think there's been any heavy tenant fit ups at all, given the nature of the property. So what you see is probably how it was from 2005 onward, and just generally good care of the property.
So in relation to the property, then, how would you class the property? Would you class it as luxury? Would you class it mid-level, low-level accommodation?
For the first floor, I want to be clear here. If you could find a tenant that needs that utility, you have a large operation, you have a billing department, you have a clerical department, you need that space. If you're coming into a building and you're looking for that, part of your lease up, 30,000 square feet or so, whatever, 45, whatever your size organization is, one of your spaces would be exactly that, because you need that utility. But having said that, I think there's a bit lesser tendencies in the market that would require that. So it's kind of I wouldn't say it's a niche, but it's definitely something that on the first floor may have a little bit less of a desirableness if you're looking to lease out on a floor by floor basis or partial basis. So part of that could be cured easily by tenant fit ups. Of course, that would be inclusive of the leasing mechanisms that's in place, so, I don't see, anything other than the first floor as being a little bit less desirable, but again. You really have to find that key tenant that needs that, so depends on your, how you look at it.
Okay, thank you. I have no further question.
Thank you. And I just have a few, and I'm going to get back to what's been a topic of everyone's questions. Mr. Pohl, is the vacancy amount. I believe in your testimony, my notes indicate that you indicated that you testified rather, that the vacancy rates for the past 3 years, you had stabilized at 18%.
Yes.
Okay. And then in answering one of the other questions, you indicated that the performance-based, because there was no functional obsolescence or that would require a adjustment of the modeled vacancy. And then you talked about performance as well, whether there was chronic vacancy. The number you had used was over a 10-year period. Is that the starting point to determine whether there's chronic vacancy, or does the stabilized 18% over 3 years indicate a potential problem that might result in that could result in a requirement for an increased allowance for vacancy?
What I would be looking at in order to come up with whether it's chronic vacancy, I want to make it clear. You're looking at an income stream. At 15%, that's kind of where you start going, for Class B, Class A asset, obviously. At 15%. What you're saying is after that, do you need to improve that income stream? Is there something that needs to be done capital-wise? Do you need to change something in the building? Is it a partial, whatever? At my view, and municipal boards that I've reviewed over my years, 20% is the discussion at chronic vacancy. At 20% applied to subject property, you're saying that there's going to be a portion of that building that's going to be vacant as it sits indefinitely. At 25%, you're saying basically it's fully vacant. At 25%, if you ever do the math, shortfall becomes such a play into the vacancy because it is a high vacancy at 25% that the income stream really doesn't generate. What I'm looking at as far as subject performance, giving a look, what is the actual marketplace over a 10-year period? Is there at market, say it's 10%, is it 10%? Did it ever fall below that? So was it 5% for a couple of years? Well, then it shows that there is no barrier to market, it's actually can beat market. And of course, if you lose an anchor tenant, all of a sudden you might be up at 45% vacancy for a year or two. And by the time you absorb that market, it starts trailing down. As long as I can see that building can absorb market at market or perform a bit below market, I'm comfortable saying we should never apply a higher vacancy. If I see a building that is over the 10 years or 8 years in here that I'm looking at, it's consistently a degree above market, and you're looking at the performance, it's trying to achieve market, it's advertising, effective advertising is appropriate, are you advertising spaces that are fully leasable, and it can't, well then I start that window was open to discuss an increase in vacancy. In this case here, I don't see that.
Okay, you've provided the 3 years and the stabilized, and thank you for that. What about prior to that? I don't see any of the data with respect to the vacancy rates prior to the 3 years that would necessitate a determination if it was in excess of the market. Is that data present?
I did bring in a few years. We look on page. So 3 years that I did look at.
I'm talking about before that 3 years.
Yeah, yes, I'm catching up to you here.
Okay.
Starting on page 25. The reason why I brought in an INE from 2009 and 2013 was for that reason, but mainly to show that what I thought that this building shouldn't have been included in the IA, or shouldn't be included in the study because primarily it was owner occupied. So as you can see on page 25, we have a 7% vacancy. on page, oh, sorry, for 2009, 7% vacancy. Reported page 27, 2010, we have a 7% vacancy. On page 29, same idea. We have a bit of a bump, vacancy at 25%. As you can see from 310 and 330, those units were not occupied. So again, I thought the totality of the building that the owner was just reducing space. But what we can see is the prior years, it was at 7%, then there's a bit of a bump. Then we're back to where we are. But from the overall scope of my mind's looking at the building, the only area that I thought was leased out in this building or available to be leased out in this building was the city lease, which is not enough to include it if the majority of the building is owner occupied and not participating in markets.
Right. Okay, my next question is with respect to the income statement that begins at page 8. Now, this is an income statement, sorry, page 8 of your brief. This is an income statement that was provided by 317 Donald, or was this one that was created by you as a result of the information from the INE?
Page 8 of my main brief?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's straight from the owner.
Right.
That submission.
Okay, that's what I thought, because you'd gone through that, and as you'd indicated as well, you like the way that Collier's presents it. You'd just taken out the ones that were not properly, or sorry, the operating expenses or non-operating expenses that were not properly included, and that shows the adjusted NOI at 769.62.36. That's the one I'm looking at.
On page 11, it shows the 2022 adjusted NOI, and I do that for each of the three.
Yeah,
highlighted for your convenience is what I removed.
Right. That includes, sorry, does that NOI include the parking rent? I wasn't clear on that. The parking rent that you have.
Parking rent is included. It's highlighted on page 8.
Okay, so that's included in the NOI of 760,000 and change.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification. I had it both ways on my notes, so I don't have anything further. Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, your evidence, please. Or sorry, before we do, does anyone need a 5-minute break?
I can wait.
Okay. Then, Ms. Schultz, you're good to go as well?
Yes, I'm okay.
Okay, then Mr. Neufeld, your evidence, please.
Thank you. If I could start, I sent Sally something earlier. Sally, has that been distributed?
Yes, it has.
Okay. So it was basically just I made 2 errors. One of them being a math error, and one of them being an actual application error of the parking. They actually kind of cancel each other out, and it does bring the value down a slight. I'm not changing my request. I just recalculating. The 8170 is still the request for this hearing. But if I'll just go through what would happen first. I mean, the CCA rent, I put in at 875. There was a step up to 9. And then the math there, my net income, every change is in red. That was a.
Sorry, if I can stop you for a moment. I'm looking at your brief. Was there an addendum to it that?
It was this morning. I sent, I guess, just a screenshot of a change I made to the front page of the brief.
I've got it, Ian. It's
okay. I'm just gonna
at the bottom.
I'm just gonna exit and then get back on. Maybe it needs
Just
refreshing.
Just refresh.
If you refresh your screen, you should see a second document.
Yeah.
Yep, it's just showing up. Great, thank you very much. I've got it now. Sorry for interrupting. Please continue, Mr. Newell.
Worries. No, I'd rather you be looking at it. No, so the net income was actually, it wasn't a it was just an entry in there from another, like it wasn't us actually adding those together. So the 1,077,000 was a complete error. It would have been about a little lower than 955 because it would have had the 875 rent. But when it's added up properly, it's 955, 385, and that includes the rent change. And then the red, I had thought that these rents included parking. I found out from the agent that that was not the case. So that was my mistake. And I'm adding just the city and confirming the city parking value because I do think it fits right. Generally, you see what a parking rent's 148, 50% expenses. That's pretty bang on. So yeah, those are the changes I just want to address before I start. Um, so essentially,
Just to
sorry.
clarify, sorry,
Yep.
Mr. Michelle, just to clarify then, you haven't changed your, sorry, you changed your rounded market value, but you didn't put it in red.
No,
So that is,
that's yeah.
just a minor detail.
I'm not changing my request in fairness to this hearing and the assessor. I requested 817, and that's what he reviewed. The 7988 is what I would say is a better calculation, but I'm not changing my request. It's just
Oh,
yeah, it just
thank
just
you.
just for fairness. Yeah. Um okay. So the three main problems I would say to today, I guess four. Location, which is number one. Number one, two, three, four, and five, so that we can say 10 things. The vacancy, the main floor. Now, I'm going to start with the main floor. And it's if you look at my page 3, the windows there of the front door are not the unit. The side there, that is the unit. Those are the only real windows in that unit. There's a couple on the complete other side that face the back lane there. This main floor was built as a check cashing facility. It was not built as an office. It was essentially, I mean, it's almost it's not industrial space, but it's an industrial finished space on the main floor of an office building. There's exposed concrete on some of it, no flooring, and then there's about half of it with cubicles. That's for like administrative staff that they were using. They had this building built by Shindeco in 2005, and then 2 years later, actually, they had an option in their lease to be able to buy it. Shinnecock didn't want to sell it off to them. They purchased it for the 14 million, but that is as a tenant, excuse me, as a tenant of the building they had built for them, and it's no way a market transaction. The city isn't relying on it. I think he said it's because it was a history. And what I agree with, but I would also add it was never a market transaction in the first place. So we're not relying on it, but I do want to address it because it is there. Then the other big thing for this building specifically, I mean, this is basically on Ellis Avenue. They think if you were from Toronto and you saw this on a map, you would go, "Hey, that's a pretty good location. It's right by this hotel that's across the MTS Center." You're from Winnipeg, you know that is not a high traffic area. It's pretty dangerous on that stretch of Donald. You know that it's too far from a skywalk, so you wouldn't really want to be in it in the main for an office in the daytime compared to something the rest of the Bs as this has been valued. Um, and I mean, though, yeah, and so those are the 2 points. And I was talking about this to the agent this morning because there's some news that the restaurant across the street is moving, and I had found out that the Alt Hotel, that entire block, has a $2 million budget for security. And I don't have that in there. That's something that I might need to look into further. It's anecdotal, of course, and I will admit that, but $2 million for a block of a year of security. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what the issue. This is one of the rougher little corners of downtown compared to. It's right on the outskirts of what is considered better, but it's also right closer to Ellis. Right north of Ellis on my front page where it says Ellis, right north of that is the giant tiger. That is an eyesore. You look out the windows and you're seeing the giant tiger and all the people out there. And that again, that's really what people are looking for. The building just north of it, Masonic Temple, we had been leasing that for years. It's still vacant. And we actually did have 2 people from Toronto who came and looked at it and said that once they got to it and saw the giant tiger out the window, they were no longer interested. But when it got on a map and being marketed, it seemed like it wasn't that far from or not bad. It seemed like it was in the downtown core, but it is not exactly. Um, the other issue then majorly is the vacancy. Now in April 22. Sorry, I guess as in April 1st, 2023, our reference date, this building was for sale or lease for over a year. And that was where the QCOM, the previous owner, um, was either looking for a rent that would save them or to sell off the building. It was no longer a need for them. They've been downsizing forever. When I was in there, and I think it was 23, I was on their fourth floor, and they had 3 people using it, right? So they were completely looking to get rid of it. And we had actually requested that the city, we had a city employee through there to request that the business tax be reduced. They couldn't do it because they had care control of the space, and I didn't really argue with that, as they did, but they weren't using it, they were marketing it, and if they were selling the building, which they were, and that's what we're valuing, it would be marketed as vacant space. Um, I originally, the first brief you're looking at, I prepared for the previous owner. It was purchased in that time. We can't talk about the sale, and I'm not going to, but I can talk the obvious. We had a value for the previous owner, and it was appealed, and then it was adjourned, and then now it's back with a new owner. But essentially, the current owner knew that Cucum wasn't going to be staying there. They knew that that was the space. He'd actually, as far as I can see, his plan is to move into the first floor with potential to move to 4, but they'd much rather be leasing out that 4th floor, as it is obviously going to get a better rent. And I do have to say I disagree. The assessor said, if you're looking for someone who has that utility, like Cucum did, I guess that's kind of a fair point, but you're looking for someone who can want the utility of the first floor. They're not going to want to pay as much as the better floors above. Yes, there might be a user for that, but they're not going to pay the full $15 for a low light main floor, unfinished check cashing facility. They built this building as a check cashing facility, and about a year or 2 later, checks completely went the way of the horse. They no longer, people don't cash checks, right? So everything digital, and that was an immediate change that they no longer. And as they slowly shrunk their business, they didn't need the building at all. I know they are looking for about half of what this, like 8,000 square feet or so, is what they're actually actively trying to move into. And so then the issue with the cap, I going to bring you to my page 54. We've got the 363 Broadway was a 12%, and what was the other one? 175 Carlton was sorry.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt. What page are you on? 54?
53 and 4.
53. Thank you.
The 363 Broadway 12% cap, it's real. It's going to be something that we're going to be debating over a lot, but it's a real cap. And we're at 8. But I really want to say that the point of what this is showing is the office market is in trouble, and it's still in trouble. It's still, what you're seeing is a lot of consolidation in the better buildings. So essentially, if you're a D, you're going to C for the same price. If you're a C, you're going to go to your Bs for the same price. And it's because there's so many vacancies that people are having to lower their rents. Back to my page 1, Solero and the Winnipeg Civic. Those 2 rents expired by today. Of course, they expired. But on April 1st, 2023, if you know that the owner is trying to sell their building, CCCA is renting for 9, which I will get into, and all that vacant space is coming, and you know that the office market is in trouble. If I'm those tenants, if I'm Solero or Winnipeg Civic, I'm making sure I get a lower rent going forward. And that's just you could say that based on what you see in the market. That is just prudent business sense. And then, so the CCCA rent that I originally put in at 875, it's corrected to 9. That was vacant from the day they bought it in 2017, about 10 years. And they eventually accepted an 875 rent, half of what they were looking for. That is chronic. That's by definition chronic vacancy. They bought it empty and eventually took half of the rent. And that is fully done. That's completely arm's length. CCCA is no relation to Cucum or the new owner. That is a complete arm's length deal. And actually, to Mr. Whitbread's question on the page 8 of the assessor, the 86,000 free base rent, that would be the difference of those 2 floors between the CCCA floor and an average floor. They put it in a base rent of 1,105,000, assuming they're going to get their face rates for everything. and then apply it later as a base rent vacancy for the difference that they actually got on that. And essentially, they are giving half the whole building away free rent. Is another way to look at it. Floor, sorry. So you've got 2 floors vacant. You got 2 floors that know the concerns in the building that have expiring leases coming up that would have to be considering getting lower rents on April 1st. And then you have 1 floor that's paying half of what the rest of them. The vacancy I applied at 2160, the actual to the day for a purchaser would have been 38%. I capped it at the Class C. That just made a little bit more sense. I think once you go over 25, that's the highest and best use issue. No one's saying that this building should be land. It's still got value. So once you go too high, that's basically what you're saying is it shouldn't be an office, but it's built as office. Highest and best use is still office. So you do have to be careful not going too high of a vacancy. 2160, I capped at C. And the debate between B and C, I don't think it would be fair to call this a C. I don't think it's fair to call it a B. But B, I'm in a B right now. I'm in a skywalk. I can walk to City Place. I can get lunch. No jacket, no nothing. You're in there. I literally park next to the arena and can walk there without that. That's what the amenities people are looking for in their Bs. When you're north of Portage on a dark block at night, far from a skywalk, you have to walk outside to get anything. That's less desirable than the B. That's why I think the actual B category in and of itself is troublesome. Our agents, I learned about a year ago, actually do B and B minus, and it's because you would get some Bs that would be $5-6 different, and you showing looking at the B market and in totality, like the assessment department does, you get completely different assets compared to each other. So our people have actually got into B minus. It's not really published that way, so it is a little tricky. But in our internal documents, you go B, good Bs, bad Bs, and that's what they're looking at it. And this is a bad B. I don't think you'd argue that it's a C, but I mean, if they took away their security, I think that's the real kicker that makes it between B and C. You can build a C building today. To say that it's new makes it a B would be not true. Generally, a B, comparing B and C's amenities, and you're no longer at amenities that are as good as your typical B in this subject property. The 8% cap rate was chosen. You could go higher, but then I'd be lowering the vacancy, and those two definitely work hand in hand. I think the reason I went with higher vacancy and lower is because this is like being a smaller building, you have more people, you can market it to more. Who actually did purchase it has his own business in the city, was looking to expand a bit, and then essentially bought a building instead of renting, right? Or buying a smaller, lower quality building. That is, you had more, and it actually happened. So this property is more apt to that kind of thing. Whereas if you were in a poor performing office tower, you would have very few people who are looking to buy that. You need an investment company, and that's just limits your potential purchasers. I think a lot of what we're seeing in our market is smaller buildings than this usually, mind you, would be in the 1 to 2 million range, but there's the people who are overpaying for the 1 to 2 million range just because they want to own a building, because they don't want to pay rent. They look at it as a 25-year plan, and if it's expensive now, who cares? Because people are paying them for their building. And that's a similar case here. It's just a bit bigger scope. And that's really why I went with an 8 as opposed to a higher that we are seeing, and focus more on the vacancy. But again, if you want to lower the vacancy, you can go up to a 9, and that still makes sense in terms of valuation. And then the other thing I guess I should touch too is the non-recoverables. You've got highlighted leasing costs and tenant improvements in the statement on assessor's page 10. Oftentimes there are, if you report to IFRS IFRS at the publicly traded board, watchdog, I guess, they can't put tenant improvements in the rent. They have to separate them out. The tenant improvements are paid for by the landlord, and they're generally on a 5-year basis. To say that that's not an expense of the landlord is completely false. There was one municipal board decision that discredited it. The municipal board was wrong. The market doesn't that way. That's an issue that we have to deal with, and that's fair. We talk about case law, and there would be a lot of case law too that would apply the 5% non-recoverable. And that's where we have always dealt with it. The 5% non-recoverable is averaged out over the course of the building. Sometimes you have good years, sometimes you have bad years. But right now, the year you're looking at for a building that only has 2 tenants and half owner occupied, they had to pay for TIs and leasing commissions. None of these leasing commissions that I had talked about earlier had happened yet at this point. That was, this is 2022, and they're paying that for that. You can't just flat out ignore it. And that's why the non-recoverable it is the best way to deal with it. 5% across the board of whether you do it or don't. Some of the people will have bad years that you can't say if $100,000 is spent in TIs and its total rent is 100,000. That building's not worth zero. You can stabilize it to 5%. So by ignoring it completely, though, you're artificially making the value of buildings higher. And again, that's 5%. That's the only thing that makes sense. Shortfall, we're way lower. We just made calculations based on the actual. Let me make sure that's right. But I use the city utilities, 245. Those are business tax rents. Our application. The tax is correct from what I can tell. $4 a square foot. City's like 14. I'm really not sure why. That seems high to me, but that's neither here nor there, as it is generally less of an issue. But all in all, I think my valuation makes a lot more sense based on what we're seeing in the market. I know also what happened in the market after the fact, which we aren't looking at, but I do have to think about, and that factors into my value. And then, but what we're looking at is April 1st, 2023. You're looking at buying a building that's over 38% vacant, or what is it worth? And how do you stabilize that vacancy when a building is 38% vacant, when the whole city is at 18? Is that worth paying 7% cap for on hypothetical income? Don't forget, there isn't as much as it's not be based on it being full. Or would you be looking at a much lower value? And I would contend you'd be looking at a much lower value for a building on Ellis, outside the skywalk that's half empty, almost half empty. Yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to get through in my presentation, and I am open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Pohl, questions?
I'll address most of the summation, but I do want to touch base on a few things. I think we clarified pre-discussion that there was a few series that were leased out that I was unaware that were arm's length. Sometimes property owners don't report that. We clarified that. I just want to go over the CCA space because I'm not sure exactly what you meant. The one that's at $8.75 now and at $9. You would agree with me, whether it's on my page 11 and 12 of my Johnson report down in my OP study, or with Colliers own brokerage, that typically for B spaces $9 is not market. $8.75, $9 range.
If you're typically for B, no, and that's exactly what I'm saying. This isn't a typical B.
So just go over the nature of that specific lease with me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. No problem. They
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt here. I'm gonna caution you both again. Please let one person finish before you continue your questions or answers.
I thought he was. My mistake. I wasn't trying to talk over. It's just
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
What is the length of this lease? How many years? How many terms?
I think. Oh, I saw it earlier. Thought it was 9 years. Yeah, 9 years. So they were empty for. I want to say they were marketing it for 4.
Okay. So
It was empty.
Is there any
Exactly.
options to renew after the 9 years?
Yeah. So no, and I see, I'm gonna guess where you're going. That 9 wouldn't necessarily stay if they renewed, but when you're, there's, you know, you got empty floors. They signed that lease because they had an empty floor and they were tired of looking for people, so they just found what they could.
So
Um,
you didn't answer my question. It's a 9-year
Yeah.
lease now. Do they have the option of typically it's another 5 years or 5, like in that
I,
9-year
I,
commitment? At their option, can they lease out another 5 to possibly 10 more years?
I suspect so. I haven't reviewed that specifically.
Right.
Based on what I would think. Yeah, I would think so, but yeah, that they would have to likely renegotiate that lease rate. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fair.
So getting to the $9 in the initial rent starting point, was there any deduction? Did the tenant have to pay any tenant fit-up costs? Was there any free rent? You kind of touched on that a little bit. Was there any incentive on a leasing mechanism to get them in where that $9 isn't reflective of necessarily market, but it's a break to get them into the building, and that lease rate will escalate as time goes on with the option to renew?
The incentive was the low rent, and that's all. They didn't pay to have them do anything. It's just they paid the net rent to the space. There, as far as I know, no tenant improvements included.
But you didn't review the lease. You
I didn't
indicated,
look at it in detail. No, I mean, I looked at
So-
I've looked at the statements of this building. I've looked at the rent rolls. I have not gone through the lease of the fine tooth comb
so
to
getting
see
back to
implied face rate.
page 8 of my brief, or on yours, the income statement, page 1 of the income statement, you indicated that somehow some of the vacancy was encapsulated by that. Like,
Yeah,
it's
well, so
somehow
that's the
factored
base
in.
rent because this statement isn't assuming Qcom is vacant. This statement is assuming Qcom's paying itself. They are still paying what they're from the business of the operating company. That vacancy based rent is really just the CCCA of, I mean, you could call it a 9-year deal of free rent at $86,000 a year.
Couple other questions as far as the vacancy. Turn to page 8.
My page 8?
Yes, your page 8. It's in my brief too, but it's on your page.
Yeah.
Just to confirm, they're reporting to us 8.8% vacancy.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. Yeah, it's, I mean, it was on lease from the owner. The owner leased it to themselves and reported it to you that way. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question I have, and this is kind of obvious, you're kind of looking at it from a broad perspective coming to it. Given that the owner, and just to confirm, they're occupying 30,000 square feet of approximately 81 or 31, almost 31,000 square feet of approximately almost 81,000 square feet, correct?
Sorry, you're talking about the previous owner?
Yeah, the owner at the reference date.
The owner at the reference date had care and control of the first and fourth floor. They had about 6 people between them in there.
But generally, it's their space. Whether they
Yeah,
use it or not.
yeah, but it was their space that they were actively looking to have someone take from them. And they
So,
were ready to move on.
so I just wanna make clear that the rent that they're reporting then, that we're examining, that portion of it is a book rent.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
$10.
So but no, that's my, yeah, so let me be clear here. That $10 is nowhere. That's me taking the blended rate of the main floor that's poor quality and a upper floor. That is not that's not a face rate anywhere. I think
Okay.
I don't know what they recorded.
So if you go to
I
my
discredited
page-
the face rates completely
Go to
on
my
that
page
exhibit.
17, because you guys want contract when contract is favorable. But if you go to my page 17. First tenant. That's the property owner. At the reference date, reporting 1545, I believe, 1550.
Yeah, but this building was for sale at the reference date, and that was not guaranteed at the sale because that is the owner's book rent.
Is there a reason why they chose the 1550 to report as far as book rent?
I imagine it was for some sort of CRA. You know what they're looking at. That's the highest, one of the highest in the building.
Okay.
That's reporting. It's not, it wasn't appraised. It wasn't determined by an agent. It didn't hit the open market. There's a lot of things that need to be satisfied to determine whether or not a rent is market, and that is not.
And last kind of question, I think you touched on it. You've made a number of changes to your income stream. You've added in the parking, you've changed a few parameters. I'll highlight and thank you for keeping with the 8,170,000 based on what you kind of indicated. Even though your new analysis is somewhat below that. I just want you to touch base on why a shortfall of $7.55. How does that play in? It's literally arguably about half of what market is.
That's what we calculated. Rents are $4.10 a foot, or sorry, foot. If you look at my statement here, this is how we calculate our shortfall every time. Tax, utilities, R&M. R&M, a buck is usually as high as we go, unless it's a crappy unless it's a rough industrial. Utilities are your numbers. They come from the city. That's exactly what the business tax assessments are providing for costs. And then the PSF, I'm opening this up. We use an estimated tax rate, but that's 13 million times 0.024 divided by the square footage. It is weird. That's generally when we're looking at these shortfalls, we're not that far. We don't even talk about it. We disagree by a buck or two, and we both say we don't care. Why it would be half?
That's why I'm kind of highlighting it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I mean, in retrospect, I should have looked at the assessment first and just applied 14, but I calculated 755.
Okay, that's the only questions I have. The rest I can address in summation.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, questions?
A couple of things. You touched on something about security costing $2 million. Can you explain that for me? I didn't quite get
that. Sorry, I keep talking over everyone. Sorry. That was the neighbor. The neighbor has that entire block is 2 million security. It was an anecdotal point of the area.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's not a cost to this building. That is what the neighbor is spending to keep the area secure.
It is what the neighbor is spending to keep the block west of them, the Alt Hotel. That is what, and the entire block there is a shared $2 million security agreement. It isn't exactly, they'd have no contract with the subject.
Yeah.
But it kind of shows you what we're dealing with in terms of security in the area.
Well, let's just talk about that for a moment, if you don't mind. Are you aware whether this relates to the fact that there are a number of entertainment venues in that area? I believe the arena is pretty close. The Burton Cummings Theater is close. Market Square, and there's a lot of people converge on that area at certain times. Or there are street people. Do you know which is causing the expenditure?
Well, the expenditure would be, yeah. I mean, the homeless population and other riffraff, we'll call it. I wholeheartedly disagree that this is close to the arena or Burton Cummings. This is Winnipeg. It's full, and we park as close as we can. You're not looking at this and saying, "Oh, that's close to the arena. That'll work." If you are owning the site, you might park there, but this is not like you're still walking outside. I actually went on Monday to try to see if I could get to this, just to look at it and feel it, and I turned around because it was too cold and I didn't have my gloves. This is not what we call a desirable location, and to say that the arena is right there, it is, I would say, the only if you walk down there at night at 8 p.m. on a weekday, you would see what I mean, and you wouldn't really consider that advantageous location to the arena.
I don't, well, that's my evidence. I don't consider it safe during the day.
Okay, well, see, I was trying to be as diplomatic as possible.
I know,
but yeah,
I know.
it's not safe at any time.
Yeah.
And to your point of people in the area, I mean, the restaurant across the street is, to my knowledge, is seeking or has applied for permits to a new location, And it's really just because this location doesn't work for them.
Okay.
It's again, I think that's really what it is. If you look at it on a map, you're not familiar with the area, you go, oh, the arena's right there. If you're familiar with the area, you know that it's just like Winnipeg in a block can go from, safe to unsafe
Yeah, yeah, okay.
just by crossing the street.
No, I won't go down that path. My second point, you use a net rate of $10, and I'm trying to understand again, you made a couple of comments about how you came to that rate for the 30,903 square feet on your statement. Help me understand that, because if we normally look at this property, we're looking at what it would market for, what that space would market for, and price it accordingly. Is that not correct?
That is correct. The choosing of my rent was the vacancy for so long resulted in CCCA getting a lease at 875. They were vacant for so long, that's the best they could do. The the main floor is lower quality space. No one would spend $15 on it. I can never see that. So it's a blended rate of the main and the upper.
Let me just interrupt you, if you don't mind. This space, is that upper levels, 3, 4?
The 30,903 is the first and fourth. And I think the best way to visualize it is the assessor brought our leasing. Let me just find it. If you go to the assessor's page 80, I was going to add this as rebuttal, but it wasn't rebuttal, so I didn't really think it was appropriate. But if you look at the 80, that main floor and the fourth floor. So there's some second floor that's highlighted as well. Well, I'm talking about the main and the fourth here. So the main is essentially a data center, and then the fourth is a better floor.
Yeah, I can see
And so
that.
then I blend that with at 10. And then when I picked that 10, it was once that 875 was applied. I'm like, you've got this, the CCCA is the third floor. At one point in my brief, I accidentally called Cucum Space third. They're on 1 and 4. CCCA is third. They have the entire third floor for 9 years, and they went from 850 to 9 in a step up. That's an indication of a problem building. If you have to sign your people for half of what you're looking for, and that is essentially just avoiding vacancy. You take what you get.
All right, so that's how you came to the 10.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I would mostly say it's due to the quality of the main floor being lower.
Yeah, I could see that from the photos. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, questions?
No questions at this time, thank you.
No, and I don't think I've got any further questions with respect to this matter. Mr. Pohl, you had indicated you had a summary.
Yes, I generally want to touch base on a few points and have a summary. So I'll start by 444 St. Mary's, which was the order that reviewed a number of years, arguments here at this board for non-recoverables, what should be included, what shouldn't be included. I can't bring in 444 St. Mary's every single time. I brought it in the past. The board collectively is well aware of it. At that appeal, we reviewed in great detail the agent's perspective. We had big studies done on it, below line items, above line items. Not in a nutshell of that order, below line items and things of such nature, which I've highlighted in the study. And the study actually speaks to it on page page 2. But we don't include that to influence rent or market value. That was a full stop. I can't come back into this hearing and rehash that every single time. Same way I can't come in comparing assessments or post-reference information. Those are full stops. So hopefully the panel will see from our perspective, and I'll stop on that. As far as market, the agent is using $10 rent and an $8.75 rent, which I think he adjusted to $9. Okay. Those rents aren't in Class A build or Class B building. If you look at My study indicates that. If you look at the Johnson report, you can see what the asking rates are. Even for a low rent, you're looking at significantly higher than that. That's not appropriate, my perspective. If you look at, and as far as the vacancy is, they're asking for a higher degree of vacancy. That's one of the main points. The rent is a smaller point. Vacancy is obviously huge in this field. The vacancy that's being reported is at 8.8%. I've already highlighted in my brief that this vacancy was at 7%. It peaked at one point to 25 or so, and then it's back at 8.8%. This building is a good quality building. There is some desirability issues with the main floor, depending on your tenant. If you have a building department, if you're in that nature, you may need that. It's part of your business operation. The first floor would have a bit of an issue, I think, on the overall, but generally speaking, the remainder of the building, majority of the building is quite desirable. As far as the vacancy, I do want to point out, it was in both our briefs, and I highlighted on the parking. If you look at the parking, $448,079, and you look at from my perspective, showing that the lot and showing that the parkade is full. If you had significant vacancy issues, you wouldn't be achieving a full parkade. You'd have underperformance in that parkade. You don't have that. Part of reviewing these properties, you can really tell when a building is starting to poorly, is when those leases are, when those spaces are dedicated to that building and that parkade is not full or not operating at a full capacity. In this case, it is. So that's a good indicator that there's no issues here. As far as security, location, let's rest on that for a moment. I'm not saying there's not an element of crime in Winnipeg downtown. There is, and there is throughout the downtown. Without an actual study showing it's better here or there, I don't see how any one of us can be considered an expert on that. Personally, I don't think that's appropriate. I think crime can happen anywhere downtown. It's the same influence everywhere. But having said that, at this location, right across the street, yeah, the old hotel on 311 Portage, the precursor to True North's actual True North and the buildings that they put up, they're in some close proximity right across the street or adjacent to it, that you would have one of the highest, lack of a better word, city patrols, as far as cadets walking around, police officers, basic security around these buildings, and that would influence this subject property. Yes, there's an element, it's everywhere, but as far as this location, this is probably one of the most secure based on the proximity thereof of the newer buildings in the shed district and everything that gets incorporated with that. So I don't see that as being an influence as far as driving down market. So in general, how do I feel about this building? I feel this building, given that it's owner occupied predominantly, we did have some review of it, and it looks like at one point in time it was predominantly owner occupied. Perhaps they reduced their space and got some other tenants in that I myself wasn't aware of. But as far as at the reference date, we see a building that is primarily owner occupied with one city lease in it. You know that city leases, you need to have a desirable building to attain a city tenant. You need to have certain criteria for that. You have that here. And generally the newness of the building, the newer build, anything that would require updating as far as the building on the first floor could be achieved through tenant fit ups. Those obviously would not be included in the valuation of this building. That'd be improved in the capital. And that's highlighted in 444 St. Mary's. We don't include tenant fit ups as far as influence and value. But I do think there'd be a measurable amount, depending on the tenancy, for the first floor, a little bit lack of demand for that. Again, you got a good tenant that you need that, perhaps not. Generally, no. The rest of the building, I think, is fine. I think it does perform at around 1550 on average, exclusive of the main floor. And I do think that's appropriate for market vacancy at 12%. As far as a lessening of the value that you see as far as what's presented, I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think as much thought was put into The $10, $9 rent, the exploration of why it's $9 doesn't seem to be there. Typically, what you find is if you're gonna get a free rent, you're gonna get a break on rent, it's a long-term lease. And then that long-term lease, you get a break up front because you're paying some of the tenant fit up costs. You might get an incentive for by free rent. Those are two things we wouldn't be inclusive of, but you would never get that on a 3-year lease. You pay full price at a 3-year lease. But if you have a 9-year lease or 10-year lease plus an option or two to extend by 5 years, property owners are usually more than okay with giving a bit of a break at the front end of the lease. We should be exploring that as far as market, and we can see that the $10 rent and the $9 rent is nowhere in line with what the market's commanding. So at $15 or hovering around $15, I do think it's reasonable. What you choose to do with the first floor, I'll leave that for the panel's discussion. But with that, I think the assessment's quite reasonable, and ask for a speaker for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Mr. Neufeld, summary?
Yes, please. The assessor likes to bring up 444 St. Mary's. There was 5% applied there. That was not an issue that was brought up because the 5% was agreed to on both sides, and the double dipping was what was discredited. We want 5% because it's a stabilized amount that costs that people have to pay. He just said they could put money into the main floor and make it worth more. Who's paying for that? What is it? Like, that's not a capital to put carpets in. That's not a capital expense. It's a tenant fit up that landlords have to pay to make their sites possible to be rented for 5 years. The other big thing too, he's talking about how this $9 rent is not market. There's 3 rents in the building, ignoring the 681 because that's kind of inconsequential, but there's 3 rents, 1385, 9, 1580. If 9's too low, the other 2 are too high. You know that 2 floors are empty. You know that the marketplace is declining. You know that the ownership of an office building is vulnerable. You're not going to continue to pay those rents. They expired between now and today. I saw what happened. If the 9 is too low, the rest are too high. We use what's in place. And in terms of, he had mentioned that it was reported to him at 8%, but in his brief, page 80, he included the leasing advertisement that's showing 38% is available for lease. That they were aware that this is empty, and I understand the point that it was reported at 8, and that's because it was owner occupied space, but they weren't using it and they were marketing it. Somebody wants to buy that on April 1st, 2023. That's known. That also know that their rents are low. They're also know that rents are declining, and there's a lot of disparity in the building. You have to stabilize those rents. It's something that are going to happen. Will the $9 go up when it expires? Maybe. It's not going to 15. 15 expired and it's going to go down. Sorry, I thought I had one other thing. And then the issue of Class B modeling. If 330 St. Mary went into to model this building, that is kind of missing the point. Having looking at the entirety of B classes as one monolith is not how our market is right now. I don't think it ever was, but it was close enough that we wouldn't have been concerned. But our market right now, office has shrunk phenomenally. It's not growing and it's not changing. It's probably flat today, post reference, but at the time we were seeing shrinking, and we're still seeing shrinking. It's shrunk. We're not still seeing shrinking. It's shrunk. Those people aren't coming back. You are having it also. It started initially when the conservative government started closing a lot of offices. COVID happened and it accelerated it. We have a lot of factors that made office less desirable, and that's shown by the fact that one floor of this building was vacant between 2007 and 2017. The 2 floors are vacant when it was for sale. This building is not you can't just build something nice wherever you want and assume it'll be worth the same as when you're on Portage and Main. This building is seriously hindered by its location. It is on Ellis, or not quite on Ellis. It was right close to Ellis. It is north of Portage. It is off the skywalk. No matter what, this building will not be as good as a building B building on the skywalk. Full stop. And it is evident in the issues it's been having with finding tenancies.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neufeld. Having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter, and that deals with all of the matters on the docket today. Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. We will deliberate, and you will have our decision in short order. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.